Alright. So, that entire demo is about 4.5. It was 4-ish hours. 4-ish hours. Which is a very hefty demo. Slight concern. I hope this wasn't like a quarter of the game or something. That would suck, but I don't really know what the estimated playtime for the game is. But this was definitely a very positive impression of the game so far. Aesthetics are really nice. Really, really nice. Just a very pretty game, very interesting environments. Very varied environments. It's about 1/10 for the main story, says Kai's. And that's not including side content? Okay. It's supposed to be 30 plus hours the game, okay. Why'd you look it up after yesterday's discussion? For MSQ only. So probably like a 50-ish hour game if you're doing completionist, maybe 60. So yeah, like I really like the aesthetics in the game. I think it's very interesting, very nice looking. Let's run down like the positives and stuff. The music was great, obviously. Probably one of the strongest parts of the game. Like, it was just good, dude. Unexpectedly good, too. I mean, I wasn't expecting it to be bad. I was just like, oh, here we go. What's this game? And then, like, the moment you get to the screen, it's go time, right? Like, on the login screen. Combat was good. Hello, Lemur. Combat was good. It's interesting, right? Like, if you don't like turn-based combat, you just don't like turn-based combat. But this is definitely, like, high-paced turn-based combat, if that makes sense. Obviously, when it's your turn, you can just put the controller down AFK for a while. But once you select a spell, that, you know, a lot of turn-based combat, you just select the spell and that's it. But as you can see, there's a lot of, like, skill shotting and parry timing and dodge timing and jumping and counter-attacking and landing skill shots for your damage and your healing and all that kind of shit.
From what I have read, when you play Expedition 33, you can expect 30 plus hours of main game, and as much side content for our completionist expeditioners.
Gotcha. Yeah, so probably, yeah, it's about 50 to 60 for completionists. That's a solid chunk of time. Combat's definitely very fun. It's very satisfying. When you, like, that big battle is, like, super fun. And if you master it, though, like, the difficulty's mastering, at least on the highest difficulty, it's mastering the parrying and stuff. But once you do, it's like you're just basically indestructible. I'm not sure later if there's going to be some kind of, like, you know, even if you master, there's some kind of, like, aura decaying your health. We'll see what they throw at us, but so far in the 4 hours we played, combat was very satisfying. I'm not here nor there about turn-based JRPG style combat. I mean, I think it's enjoyable. I've played a bunch of them throughout my life. I'm not like, it's not my favorite, it's not terrible, but this combat was definitely very satisfying because I'm a big fan of, like, you know, high skill ceiling, small, like, parry window stuff. That's why I like a lot of Souls games and shit like that. So combat was good. I was a little worried about the depth of combat going into this, but looking around, it seemed really shallow on the surface, but it's actually quite deep. I'll try to explain it real quick for whoever is trying to understand what's going on. You basically have a weapon slot on each character. Here. Can I use my mouse for this? Yeah. You basically have a weapon slot for each character. I'm not 100% sure how you level up weapons, but you can level up weapons because, as you can see, some weapons have like different unlocks at different levels that give them perks. The different weapons have different elemental damage, so like you saw for that fight, we switched to, that guy was resistant to physical, so we swapped to a frost weapon just for a bit of extra damage on budget Robert Pattinson. I'm not 100% sure how the scaling works. They didn't explain it very well. Like the defense and luck, it seems like for every X points in what it scales with that letter grade, kind of similar to Souls games and other RPGs, you'll get some damage on the weapon. It's not very good about telling you how much or at what breakpoints or anything like that. So I found it a little weird. But then again, a lot of RPGs do that, so it's not like something privy to this game. I just like information, so the more information, the better. But either way, every character has a weapon. The weapons all seem to be the same, so it's not like I can equip a sword and shield on this guy or cast spells or whatever. they're all like one-handed swords with a pistol. They just look different, have different elements, and can have different perks for the levels. So that's just like the character's weapon, if that makes sense, right? Outside of the weapons themselves, they have these 3 slots called pictos, which you can kind of think of them like your like trinket or ring slots or amulets, whatever, for like in terms of other RPGs. And each one of them that we found has passive stats. So you can see it has speed and crit rate, and it has a little like perk at the bottom. It says first damage dealt and taken deals 50% more damage. So I was a little worried because the characters could only wear 3 of these. And you find a bunch of them, as you can see, right away. But the combat goes, the build depth goes a fair bit deeper than that. Because what happens is, the complement to this pictos, aka trinket system, is that you have these things called luminas, alright? And you can have a character equip one of these and level them in combat. I think it's 4 fights, so you can see there's like a diamond segment here. Each one's in quarters, so every time you fight you get a yellow segment, so it levels it up. Once it's like fully leveled, you can use the perk, not the passive stats. You can use the perk on each one of the pictos on any character. So you can go well beyond 3 perks per character. And ultimately what starts to happen is you're just equipping the trinket slots for passive stats. So like, oh, I want crit rate on her because I want her to crit a lot, so I'm going to equip a bunch of crit stuff. But then you go to edit luminas. And here you can see these are all of the ones that I've leveled, right? So she has access, all of the characters have access to all of these different ones without needing to equip the trinket itself, the pictos itself, because you leveled it. So if I want her to have 20% chance to burn on free aim shot, which comes from another pictos that she's not wearing, I click it and I can equip it. And now it's this kind of burgundy color, and it means she has it equipped. And that is with your Lumina points. And you get Lumina points by leveling, by finding a bunch of items that you can use on characters, etc. So you obviously can't use literally every single one. I don't know, maybe in the end you can. Like this costs 10 Lumina points, which is insanely expensive to have this. But you can mix and match as you like and basically respec whenever you want. So I can just take that one off again. I have 3 points back. I could take this one off because maybe I don't want them for a fight, and I equip this one instead. And now I have 2 points left, so might as well just equip that, you know? So it actually allows for a fair bit of depth because there's a lot of them. And I mean, this is only 4 hours of the game, so you're probably going to have a massive fucking list of these pictos that you can mix and match for, you know, the tougher fights, right? So the build depth actually goes a fair bit, well, deeper than I thought it would at initial glance because of this kind of Lumina system where you can equip the passive effects of all the amulets, or as many as your points allow, and make a pretty in-depth build like that. Outside of that, the final thing, of course, are skills. I have to go to the rest to show you guys the skills. So there's a bunch of skills on each character. And each character, at least for the 3 that we tested in the demo, have very, like, different combat styles. Oh, there's also attributes, which are to be expected. I'll just quick blurb on it. It's just vitality, might, agility, defense, luck. So, like, crit, damage reduction. Again, I don't really know how the damage reduction works. I don't really know what the numbers over here mean exactly and how the scaling works. It just wasn't explained very well. But most of the stuff here is pretty self-explanatory. More health, more all damage, faster, and helps your defense as well, meaning you go first in combat, go more frequently in combat. Damage mitigation, not sure the math behind it. And this is just mostly crit and speed, but crit predominantly. And you get 3 attribute points per level. We got to level 13 in 4 hours of demo, 4.5 hours of demo, something like that. So I expect that the levels will probably get reasonably high in the full breadth of the game. And then finally, there's the skills, right? So each character has their own set of skills, their own skill tree, and they cost different amount of skill points per. These skill points are... some skills cost multiple skill points. So as you can see, this one in the middle here, whatever it is, guard down, applies defenseless, costs 4. She has 4 now because we just leveled. And then you can mix and match. And as I was saying, each character has their own, you know, passive, their own, like, combat style. Very distinct combat styles. and they're further augmented by and changed by whatever spells you implement. And the spells, like, within themselves have pretty deep systems. I mean, it's nothing insane, you know, not to the level of, like, PoE and ARPGs and stuff, but, like, there's a fair bit of depth there that affects gameplay and combat flow. So, for instance, for her, right, she's all about stance dancing, and she has 3 different stances. So she'll have abilities that put her in one stance, and then abilities that, you know, put her in another stance, but if she's in stance number 1, they get like an increased effect and things like that. So you want to kind of domino effect into different abilities. You know, she has some really interesting stuff where she applies what are called stains, which is like, think of them like element debuffs. And depending on what spells she casts, she gets different element debuffs. And she can store up to 4 debuffs so that when you cast, like, for instance, I was casting a frost spell, that frost spell applies an ice stain or debuff and a light debuff, which is like a wild card one. It could be consumed by any element. And then when I cast the fire dot applies 3 stacks of burn. But if she has an ice stain, it applies 5 stacks of burn and it does more damage, right? So you want to cast the ice first so that you can get a more powerful fire cast. And she has all these spells that intertwine with each other like that can consume different things for different effects, like make them cost less, make them do more damage, make them heal for more, because she has a lot of healing. Obviously, she kept us alive in that Giga fight we just did with all the rezzing. So each character has like a lot of, like, quite, so far, I'm pretty impressed, decent amount of depth to their combat themselves, without any pictos and trinkets and all that stuff we talked about. Just the flow of combat is really interesting. There's a lot of ways to build and ways to go. I honestly haven't even sat down to read all of these spells at all. We just kind of like picked things and went. And finally, probably people asking about respec. You can respec anything with this recoat. In 4 hours of gameplay, we got 1 of them. So I guess they're pretty rare. So perhaps a good or a bad thing, but be careful what you're speccing. Maybe the full game will be different. But it's not going to be, it's not something where you can just respec on the fly like you could with those luminous things, like, you know, where you're kind of mix and matching the passive effect of trinkets. Yes, little one. Oh, you're eating now, okay. Yeah, that's about it. Outside of that, the zones are like fairly linear, but like thick, semi-open linear. Like there's little side paths to explore, optional enemies. We found a few optional side bosses and elites that drop weapons. If you rest, it respawns all of the basic enemies, but not bosses and elites. Those usually drop, like I said, weapons or something more rare like a Pictos. There's some chests in the area, currency to collect, so like it's worth exploring, but it's nothing crazy. Then there's a big overworld that you explore, and that's where you kind of walk to other zones, but like you manually walk there. You walk to other zones and you zone into new areas and go to town. So yeah, no, honestly, and the story is super intriguing to me. That's probably what drew me into the game in the first place. I was like, oh, that's like, what a weird world and environment. Everything's so peculiar. What's going on? And they've done a good job of definitely drawing me into it now. And I'm really curious to see where like the rest of it goes. It's not all sunshine and daisies. Performance was not great. I mean, I'm running like still a pretty decent system. It's not anything crazy these days. I'm on a 3090 with a 5900. And I didn't even have graphics cranked to max at all. And I was still getting some areas that were like 40, 50 FPS. We're on like high instead of ultra kind of thing. No options for DLSS or FSR or anything like that. I'm assuming and hoping that's just kind of like a demo only thing. As you guys remember, whoever watched yesterday at the beginning, motion blur was bugged. Even turning motion blur off still didn't turn motion blur off. We had to turn off post-processing or something to actually turn it off. So there's clearly some issues they still need to work through and some bugs and hopefully some more optimization for the game. But it wasn't terrible, don't get me wrong. You know, I didn't crash, there were no bugs, so it was very clean in that sense, but it was like, it was a little oof in some areas for FPS dump. But, you know, who knows what build number this is for the beta, as Kaz is saying. They still have a month and a half and all that kind of stuff, so yeah. Yep. So, I think that's about it. I think that covers more or less all the subjects, unless you guys have any questions, but... and yeah, there will be more party members, as we saw. Oh, and like, last thing for, obviously, who cares for this kind of stuff? There are like different outfits for the characters. Some people obviously are all about that. So I assume some you unlock through stories and achievements. Some you probably unlock through like pre-ordering and digital deluxe editions and stuff like that. But the characters all have a bunch of different outfits that you can play around with. And you can also run around as whatever character in your party that you'd like. So if you don't like running around as her, you can run around as him. And whoever. It doesn't affect combat at all. So yeah. Cool.